the Pat Mayo Experience mini version for UFC Fresno DraftKings picks and preview. If you want a full fight-by-fight breakdown, go to the Pat Mayo Experience audio feed up on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and Audio Boom for the full Dogger Pass podcast. Breaking everything down, Paul Shaughnessy and Cody Saftic of the Fight Network. What's happening?
That's right, just hanging out here on another cold Toronto day.
Are you happy there are not like 38 fights to break down between two cards this week?
Yeah, however, it gets your blood boiling when you're breaking down that many fights. You got to analyze so many different things. This card, not saying it's a bad card, it'll be fun, it'll be entertaining, but a lot of names that the casual fan probably has not heard of.
So I wouldn't know then?
Yeah, probably not. Then again, you probably don't know the majority of 125-pound women, which we had to break down last week. But yeah, we didn't actually have to talk about DK purposes, but I know Paul Shaughnessy was probably feeling the pain on that one.
All right, hit me. Who are you going with?
Well, we're going to start off with Luke Sanders, $9,000. I mean, Luke Sanders, a cool hand, guy that always been behind. Been watching him for a long time. Tough, gritty guy. And I think the biggest knock on him is that if you look at his fight with Alcantara, he is dominating top to bottom. He just gets caught in a fluke submission out of left field. This guy, $9,000, he averages 84 points. It almost seems like it's a picture-perfect matchup with him taking on Andre Sukumantath. Now, I got nothing but love and respect for Sukumantath. He trains with a good friend of mine, Evan Boris, out of Hard Knocks 365 out in California.
Would you say
in Florida, sorry.
Would you say he's your best friend?
I don't know that, but he's a great coach. And obviously, if you're looking at him as an assistant coach to Henry Hoof, who's the gym's main coach out in South Florida, it's a great gym. And they've brought a lot of the guys over that used to be called the Black Zillions. Obviously, we've talked about the Black Zillions many of times in the past. But that Jacko Hybrid Training Center, it's gone. It's defunct now. Most of those guys have gone on to Hard Knocks 365. So because the gym doesn't really have that same name, they still got the same reputation as far as I'm concerned. It's a world-class gym. Sukumantath's a guy that never really hit the levels. I mean, he comes from a good striking background, good kickboxer, pretty poised guy. I'm not huge on his ground game, and I think that's what he'll probably get exploited. The other thing, too, Pat, is that he kind of stands flat-footed. He stands right in front of you, stands linear. He strikes linear with his straight punches for the most part, and I figure like Luke Sanders is just a little more dynamic than him. He'll probably use his striking long enough to set up these takedowns. Once he gets these takedowns, he should be able to just pour it on him. Sukumantath's not a quitter. He'll hang around, but, I mean, if you're just putting volume on this guy, especially with your ground and pound, submission attempts if you're able to, and just pit him down. If he gets back up, take him right back down. We'll score those points. 9,000 is a little expensive. I would have liked to take Jason Knight, but 9,300 is just a little too much for Jason Knight. So we're going to take the slightly cheaper option, which is cool hand Luke Sanders.
All right, who's next at the top end?
Moving on, we're going to take Alex Perez, $8,900. This one's obviously a risk versus a reward kind of guy because he's $8,900, which is obviously expensive, and he's making his UFC debut. So when you look at average point strikes, well, we don't have an average for him, Pat, because, I mean, he just hasn't been there yet. But he's a guy that's got over 20 professional fights. He's been competing for a long time, and I feel like his opponent, John Della Thomas, the problem with Della Thomas is that I think he's like the third youngest fighter on the UFC roster. He's 21 years old, and that really showed in his respective UFC debut. He comes in, he's undefeated at the time, 8-0, and it's just a little too much. Now, at the time, he's taking on a fighter, Inoue, from Japan, who was also very young, very inexperienced. And you just got to really see that coming out of the Philippines, obviously he's going to be a good striker. That's going to be his, predominant striking skill, or his predominant martial arts skill is going to be his striking. But he just doesn't have the experience. And because of that, he finds himself in certain spots that, more experienced fighters would be able to work their way out of. But he's very green still. When you look at Alex Perez, we don't know a whole lot about him. He's mostly fought lower levels of competition, but he is more experienced. He does train at a higher level. And I do feel like he'll find a way to victory. Now, I've got to give Della Thomas one thing. He's a very durable guy. So with $8,900, we want the finish. We absolutely want the finish. But with Perez, he can go the decision. We've seen him go the decision many of times, and I feel like he will just score an accumulation of points.
He's just a volume-based fighter?
Yeah, and he'll get the takedowns, and he'll work with the takedown. And if for whatever reason he's not good enough to just hold you down and you get back up, then he should have no problem going back to the game plan, and that's peeling him back down. I do admit the price tag is very high, but when you look at some of these other options, a lot of them are risky. I would consider him a riskier option. However, I feel like he's on the safe side. If you're playing cash game, I don't mind him. If you're playing GPP and you want that finish, maybe he's not the best bet, but I can afford him on my lineup, and for $8,900, I'll take that play.
Plus, if he can get some volume and even win by decision, doesn't mean he can't be the highest scoring guy on the slate.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another thing that we've been talking about lately is that, you got to get that first.
Well, look at Ngannou. Ngannou finished right away and was like 7th in scoring.
Yeah, that's exactly it. We look at a couple weeks back. I mean, there's a fight between Beck Rawlings and Jessie Rose Clark, and Jessie Jess, it's not an exciting fight whatsoever, and she scored something like 80 points. She was a value play, had something like like 80 points. I don't think anybody saw that coming. When you watch the fight, you're like, well, where are these points being scored from? A couple takedowns here, a couple ground transitions here, a couple significant strikes here. But it's a 3 rounds. That accumulation gets you those points. I feel like Alex Perez could do the exact same thing. And if for whatever reason John De La Thomas starts coming on a little bit, we got to remember he's 21 years old. When you throw in these young kids into the UFC under the bright lights, a lot of times they struggle. Now he's already had his UFC debut out of the way, but he fought a similar green young fighter and he came up short. Now he's taking on a more seasoned guy, a more experienced guy, and he's got to travel all the way to California in order to do so. I just feel like it's recipe for disaster for him.
All right, so we have a $9,000, $8,900. Not going to the very top, which means I'm guessing you're going to target like this mid-range of fighter.
I would love to just fill it up with mid-range fighters. However, because we're looking for dynamic fighters who are going to score high, it's a little bit riskier. But we're going to go for $8,400. We're going to take Liz Carmouche. Liz Carmouche, this is a fighter who we talk about experience. She's as experienced as you could get. She's been fighting for a very long time. She's fought the best of the best in women's MMA. She even headlined the very first women's title fight in the UFC against Ronda Rousey. Came up short, albeit gave Rosie a tough test, especially at that time. Now, she's taking on Alexis Davis. Now, Alexis Davis is a Canadian fighter. We've had the privilege of watching her many of times, but she was probably another Strikeforce vet, another girl that's very experienced, don't get me wrong, but she comes from a Muay Thai base. Even though she's a Jiu-Jitsu black belt, she predominantly wants to stand striking, and she wants to throw just a high volume of kicks. I've fallen into the problem of picking Alexis Davis in the past, because in my mind, geez, if the fight stays standing, she's tenacious. I mean, she's always marching forward, she's always throwing strikes, and she's landing for the most part. Even if she's not landing with her punches, she'll throw 2 or 3 punches at a time to land one of them, but it's the kick game. It's that volume of kicks will add up. If you try to take Alexis Davis down, she's a BJJ black belt. Her husband's a BJJ black belt. She trains at a very high level. She'll be able to overcome certain ground spots, maybe get a reversal, maybe get a takedown of her own, and maybe put that BJJ to good use and try to find a submission. I don't mind Alexis Davis, but she was getting a little bit older. She was getting a little bit of war-torn a little bit. I mean, you look at her face and you can just tell that this is a girl that's been in many, many, many wars over her career. But she actually gets I don't want to say a surprise pregnancy. I just don't think that she was planning on getting pregnant as she's fighting in the UFC at the highest level. But she gets this pregnancy. She takes some time off. And then since she's returned to the UFC pad, I'm just not really impressed. It's almost like the game's always ever evolving. It's always changing. It's always getting better.
So she took 2 years off and it passed her by?
Yeah, and then her last fight with Cindy Dandois was just the worst fight you've ever seen. She somehow squeaks it out in a very, very, very close fight against a girl that just should not be at this level. Now, Liz Carmouche is also coming off a layoff. I will respect that. I will admit that. However, this is a girl that's very tough. She has way better, not better, I don't want to say grappling per se, because yeah, she's taking on a BJJ black belt, but she's way stronger. She'll get these takedowns. Once she gets these takedowns, she'll just stay in top position and he'll grind away. If it's standing, Alexis Davis, sure, we'll talk about the Muay Thai, we'll talk about the kicks, but she's so unbelievably flat-footed. I mean, she looks like literally female version Tim Sylvia in the way she moves with her footwork. And I feel like Carmouche is a little more dynamic. We're able to cut angles. She'll be able to land on her. And then because you stand so upright, it's easier to get those takedowns. Now, because she's one of those fighters that, well, I'm good striking, I'm good off my back, she doesn't really defend the takedowns as much. She mostly just gets taken down. And I feel like Carmouche should do that. Carmouche should get us points off takedowns. She should get us points off, maybe if she can't even pass guard or anything like that, and she's not getting the ground transitional points, she'll get ground and pound points. And if this one does go 15 minutes, and I do expect it to go 15 minutes, she's another one of these fighters that should be able to score a high volume of points over the course of the 3 rounds.
All right, 3 underdogs or 3 value plays very quickly.
Okay, I don't know that I play this on a cash game, but if you're looking for GPP, I got to go with Brian Ortega. It's mostly price pad, $8,100. He just seems
knockout potential?
Yeah, he's got everything potential. I mean, I think he's the only fighter in UFC history to score 4 consecutive third-round finishes because his cardio is second to none. I mean, he's basically like a Diaz brother. And I say that not just because he looks almost identical to Nick Diaz, but he's got that style. He's got that style where another BJJ black belt who he doesn't care about his wrestling whatsoever. Because unlike Alexis Davis, if you take down Brian Ortega, you are in a world of hurt. When he stays standing, he just puts pressure on you. His cardio seems to be second to none. He can always push that pace on you. Now, there's been certain fights, absolutely, where he's been down 2 rounds going into the third. He probably needs the finish going to the third. But almost effortlessly, the submission just comes to him, or the knockout just comes to him. He knocks out Clay Guida. Like, how many people knock out Clay Guida? He submits Renato Moicano, who's undefeated at the time. And come on, Moicano, another BJJ black belt. The guy is just he's an opportunistic striker. He's an opportunistic grappler. He finds the way to get the victory. Now he's got 5 rounds to deal with. Now he's fighting Cub Swanson. Cub Swanson, we all know how good Cub Swanson is. He's a durable guy. Well, how durable really is he? He's got 7 pro losses and he's been finished all 7 times. In fact, he's been submitted 5 times. So even though I think Cub Swanson on paper is a better striker and he's a better wrestler, I don't know how Ortega's going to get the fight to the ground. However, in 25-minute time period, it's probably going to happen. Now, I know people will be quick to say, listen, Cub Swanson is being submitted by Frankie Edgar and Max Holloway. Those are maybe the number 1 and 2 guys in the world. Yeah, but we also got to think Ricardo Lamas takes him down and dominates him. Way back in his old days, you can tell he's a striker. He gets submitted. If you're Cub Swanson, he wants that title shot. His hands break pretty much every fight. So he realizes, okay, even though I'm getting a little bit older and I've got a lot of mileage on me, I need my title shot and I need it now. However, he's choosing to fight Doo Ho Choi, who, even though he's an excellent fighter, he was unheralded at the time. So it's an odd choice for a savvy veteran like Cub Swanson to take on Doo Ho Choi, but he takes the matchup. After that, you're coming off a fight of the year, probably, in my opinion, the fight of the year. After that, you take on Artem Lobov, a completely unranked challenger who's got a near 500 record? It makes no sense. The guy's just biding his time. And that's what's going to get you caught. Because this next generation guy, they're coming up quick. And Brian Ortega, he's a next generation guy. So the fact that he's got 25 minutes, if we're looking at, his floor, I think his floor is pretty high. Because he's not going to get finished, at least in my opinion. The guy's super durable. He'll stick around. And if he wins, and I ever so slightly favor him to get the victory, then he should score very high. And if he gets into a war, an absolute war, and he can pull out one of these third or fourth round finishes on Cub Swanson, a guy that, can definitely start to get faulty the longer a fight goes, then he's going to score very big. $8,100 is just too enticing of a price. I have to take him.
All right. 2 more names. Who are the 2 names?
Okay, well, we're looking at cheap value plays here. Albert Morales, $8,000, taking on Benito Lopez. Benito Lopez is a team alpha male guy, so the wrestling does, worry me ever so slightly. He's an 8-0 guy. He's undefeated. I could see people favoring a guy like Benito Lopez, but Albert Morales is a guy that kind of got thrown into the UFC maybe just a little too soon. He wants to strike, predominantly wants to strike, and the later his fights goes, he tends to get a little bit tired. However, I do feel like he's correcting that fault, and if he keeps his fight standing with Benito Lopez, maybe he can show him what UFC veteran quality guy can do, because Lopez, he just really hasn't had that gut check performance. I believe he's coming off a win over Steven Ocho Peterson, who I'm a big fan of, but he's a career legacy FC guy, or LFA now, I guess as they're called. He's a regional show guy, and I mean, he just squeaked out a split decision over him. If Albert Morales keeps his fight standing, he kind of fights similar to Steven Peterson. He's kind of got that same grit to him, that same style, that same length. I do think he's going to rack up some points. 8,000, I'll take the play. And Jemaine Sterling, I think this is another one where you got to go with the value. When the line first got released, when the fights first got released, Jemaine Sterling was initially in with another opponent. Marlon Moraes, he fought 2 weeks ago, right? He says, you know what? I want a big fight. Slot me in. I'll take a big fight. They say, okay, you know what? We'll give you Jemaine Sterling. He takes Jemaine Sterling. Should be a fun fight. Should be a good fight. $7,600 on Sterling. Sterling's got the key wrestling advantage.
Is he the favorite in this fight?
No, I mean, it's going to be a close fight. As far as I'm concerned, it's going to be a very close fight. Marlon Moraes, definitely so, should be the favorite. However, Jemaine Sterling, you can't really sleep on him. When he's the favorite, he tends to lose. When you start to doubt this guy a little bit, you realize, geez, Aljo's young. He's ever improving. He trains out of the Serra Longo fight team, so he's got a good group of guys that surround him at all times, and he's getting better. Now, he says he's falling in love with his striking a little bit. And against Marlon Moraes, I don't want to really see you use your striking a whole lot. At least use it enough to get this guy flustered, because a lot of people will compare him to like a 135-pound John Jones. Just because he uses that length, he's got a very flashy style, very quirky style, and then if you try to go in on him, if you try, I'm just going to blitz this guy, then he's got the takedowns in his back pocket. If he does get the takedowns, he's probably not a better grappler, but it's so hard at this level to just buck these guys off you. And Sterling's a good wrestler. Now, Marlon Moraes, there's no doubt about it, he's got good takedown defense, but if we've noticed anything from his last fight, is that you can take him down. The thing is, John Dodson never really put up much of an effort of taking him down. John Dodson's also absolutely tiny, so there wasn't really that distance game. Now you're going into a completely different fight altogether. Also, he got banged up in his last fight. He got dropped in the first round against Dodson. This is a quick turnaround. How's that quick turnaround going to affect him? I don't know. A lot of these fighters, they put in full camps. They peak for a certain date. You're trying to get the best you can be for a certain date. And then he probably was at his best in that last fight against John Dodson. But now you give him a quick turnaround. He's got to come over 2-3 weeks later, and he's got to take on a guy like Jemaine Sterling, who's got a completely different style. Well, it's just different altogether. So now you're dealing with a guy that's not 5'2", and the guy that's going to use his distance. As he's using his distance, Marlon Moraes, who loves those leg kicks, who loves those in-the-pocket punches, if he tries to close that distance and Jemaine Sterling can score a takedown, I do believe he can, well, then he's got to work his way up. If he works his way back up, we just reset. Sterling, $7,600, he's not above getting a couple takedowns. He's not above winning some striking exchanges and just squeaking this one out on the scorecards. So I don't mind the price whatsoever. He's a guy that averages 70.8 points, and he's also, experienced some tough losses in the UFC. So I feel like he can get the job done, he can score some good points, and I do think that he'll ever so slightly have the advantage and get the win. So $7,600, I'll take it.
Cody Saftic, check him out on Fight Network and on Twitter at CJ Saftic, and of course on the Dogger Pass podcast on the Pat Mayo Experience audio feed on iTunes, Stitcher, Podomatic, Audio Boom, and Google Play, along with Paul Shaughnessy. That'll be coming out late on Wednesday night to get you ready for UFC Fresno. I'm Pat Mayo. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.